Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for making the time to attend this session. I have heard it before or something similar to it before, and I know that it'll be very interesting. So I will not talk about what the topic is because Anand will be covering that. I'll just tell you about Anand. He's an expert in tribology, which is which is a word that I learned only when I was, trying to find out what Anand does, what his career was. He's retired now. It's apparently the science of wear and friction and surface engineering. He holds a PhD in material engineering from the University of North Carolina. And he worked in the US with GE aircraft engines for many years. Then he returned to India and worked with DRDO, TVS, and Praxair before rejoining GE in Bangalore, GE R&D. And he retired from there in 2019. And during his career, he has over 30 US patents to his name, and his team has more than 70 patents. And he has solved some of the most difficult surface engineering problems, such as massive silt erosion of hydro turbines. Uh, Aside from this, he has also played a key role in driving a solar consortium covering institutes and industries in India and in the US. And if you notice, if you've looked at the pic in the poster that we've shared, he's holding a book. He's also written a chapter for that book.
Thank you. I didn't write that book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's written a chapter. so, so this is what Anand does for work. Then after that, aside from that, he's also a keen trekking enthusiast and takes off at least once a year to the Himalaya. He also treks extensively over the Bandipur hillscapes, much more often. He goes there, I think, at least once or twice a month as part of his other work, which is stewarding the eco restoration of the forest in his voluntary capacity as a project governance committee member of Junglescapes, which is an NGO that has been involved in this work for the last 12 to 13 years. And it is this work that Anand will be telling us about today. So, Anand, all yours.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Uma. And thank you for asking me to give this talk. Um, Uma has joined me on a few Junglescapes trips as a volunteer. And I dare say that if the connectivity breaks off, she could just, do the presentation for me because she knows what we have done really well. And so I really want to just thank all of you for listening to me. So let me get started with my presentation. Let me see if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, yes, we can see the screen. Yeah.
You
Sorry,
can.
didn't realize I was on mute. Yes, your screen is
Okay,
visible.
good. So maybe to conserve bandwidth, I can turn off my camera in case that's
Sure,
coming
you
in the
can
way.
do that.
Yeah. I'm not able to find the outcome. Yeah, I'll stop the camera. All right. So, there are different ways to, title this talk. We could have called it restoration-based livelihoods because there are 60 people, Jaina Kurubas mostly, who've been working in the forest for the past 15 years, trying to restore the forest. And in many ways, it is their story. And what we have done essentially is facilitated all of this. But having said that, I think a key role that many of us have played. I introduce virtually at least the other co-authors in this in this presentation. Ramesh, of course, he leads Junglescapes. He's a chartered accountant by profession. Got into restoration and conservation. As chartered accountants are, he's very exacting, very rigorous in his work, and takes all of this really, really seriously. and has been the driving force in making this happen. Hanumant is my colleague, a committee member, well-known figure in Mysore, well-known figure in SRAG, the Ecological Sustainability Rotarian Action Group, that's SRAG. He's a well-known figure in that. And he essentially is the real bridge to the local community. He comes from Mysore. And me, of course. What's been driving me in all of this has been a lot of curiosity, a lot of motivation to, do something which is good and helpful, both to Mother Nature and to the local communities. So all of you know about Bandipur, so I'm not going to give you too much about this in terms of where Bandipur is, but situationally, Bandipur is about 1,000 square kilometers, and east to west, it's quite a distance. It's probably about 70 to 80 kilometers. And this region that we are working on is actually in the rain shadow belt of Nilgiris, because Nilgiris is probably occupying, 3/4 of the screen, with the square grid being pretty much the center point of Nilgiris, about 25 kilometers down. So this belt is about 800 to 900 meters above sea level, and Nilgiris, of course, towers up to 2,500 meters. And there's quite a bit of rain shadow effect right here. If you take a look at the project sites, we still call it as located reserve forest and a buffer, but there has been a notification recently where located reserve forest has now become part of the Kundakiri range, which is shown here. And Kundakiri range is pretty much part of the tiger reserve. And then we work on the Bandipur Tiger Reserve proper, especially in managing invasives. So then the question is, what is degradation? There are two different types. One essentially is plenty of invasive species. So this is one location in Godakere where the entire forest floor is taken over by Lantana camera. This is a typical site in Bandipur Tiger Reserve as you drive through in the dry season. Also, quite a bit of the forest floor written with Lantana camera. In these locations, it's not like humans like doing cattle grazing, etc. But we have a lot of other human activities which we kind of overlook. Safari loads are raid, roads are cleared on either side, so that forest patrols could kind of watch what's going on. And the safari roads essentially are a highway to bring in exotic seeds from the outside. And the safari roads also break the canopy up and allow invasive species to come in and take root. And what you have essentially is something like this. Now, in the buffer areas, basically, what we have is a lot of human presence. People go into the forest to graze. People go into the forest to collect firewood. People go in and extract whatever they can from the forest, and this has been going on for decades. So what we have seen is locations that we have not touched at all at Junglescapes still look as degraded as this. There's no real change. The landscape really does not have the capability to repair itself. But just across, as a crow flies, half a kilometer out, wherever we have kind of come in and involved, we found that the landscape has responded really well to some of our initiatives. So this is the degradation profile. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes, very
Sure.
clear.
Okay. So Junglescape's anchoring point is that we want to create healthier wildlife habitats, and so we don't want to kind of necessarily go to a new location like a hillock in Tumkur, for example, and say let's restore it. We want to restore habitats where there is an impact on wildlife. And so the key is to actually bring back biodiversity, If you bring in biodiversity consisting of, you know, trees that give you shade, um, um, shrubs which are not palatable but give you ground cover, palatable trees and shrubs, palatable grasses, then you really have a healthy wildlife habitat. So, what's the restoration methodology? Um, I really want to mention, that back in 2008-9, um, when we started, um, we consulted with other NGOs and essentially had a list of saplings which could be seen locally, based on some surveys that were done, and we had a fairly good list of indigenous saplings that could be planted. And you know um, in 2 to 3 years of working, what you've seen is that the survival rates are not great, maybe around 20-25%, and the growth rates are very low. So it was very clear that just planting these saplings is not going to restore green cover. It's going to take time. The saplings are going to take time, those that survive. And the reasons are that the rainfall can be as low as 600 or lower. In fact, in 2016, we probably had only 350 of rain. After summer showers, the entire rainfall actually packed up. Um, and the soil is highly degraded. The soil is highly degraded because there's no vegetation on the ground, very highly compacted. If it rains, there is a lot of runoff because of low soil moisture. The water flow just takes the topsoil out. So the soil is challenged in terms of nutrition. The soil is challenged in terms of moisture retention. So we shifted to assisted natural regeneration. Um, so what's the ANR methodology? Um, Overall goal is to actually improve the site water table, but the micro goals are that we want to reverse soil erosion, improve moisture levels, remove invasive species, and revive grass cover, and give natural juvenile support. In some ways, you can even look it up as a bottoms-up idea. The bottoms-up idea is that you go into these forests, there is enough root stock and seed stock in the ground in the forest floor. You will always see natural saplings growing, with a fairly healthy stem, a little bit of greenery, going to a height of maybe around anywhere between a foot and 3 feet. And these were not planted. So our theory was that if you dig a trench next to it, that trench would harvest water, and these natural juveniles would grow faster. So that's one method that we've tried, and we tried them at scale, at the rate of about 100 of these small trenches per acre, which is equivalent to actually planting 100 saplings per acre. And so we've done more than 100,000 trenches across the landscape. Reviving grass cover. So if you see soil which is highly compacted, especially on terrain with a very gentle slope, we would kind of scoop out a saucer and allow more water to actually accumulate there and disperse grass seeds, grass slips, and so on, in remove invasive species. And through all these methods, including gully plugs, which I'll cover, we reverse soil erosion and improve the soil moisture levels. So what that results in is sometimes a GEVIS moment where you go back to the forest 2 months after the rains and you still see the streams are flowing. There is water coming out of the forest, and those are the real outcomes of what we would have done by way of just ANR methodology to improve hydrology. So basically, remove invasive species, piney grass and shrubs, piney tree species, and keystone species. That's the overall progression that is targeted. And when you talk to biome, we really have to talk about watersheds. So every hillock that we kind of walk through is a watershed. And if you look closely enough, you'll see channels in these hillocks, which are essentially locations where water tends to accumulate and flow down at faster and faster velocities. And those are kind of represented by some of these um, let's say, branches. And these branches essentially converge to essentially what would be a more significant artery, so to say, and then they all kind of converge to a wider stream, which is what we see coming out of these systems. So as we kind of focus on these watersheds through approaches like stone overflows, through small check dams, through small trenches and the like, what really happens is that the moisture availability increases. Uma has come with me a few times into these regions, and and what we would also see is that wherever we have placed obstacles to the flow of water, and where we let it accumulate, we actually see improved green cover, very significant improvements in vegetation, um, both in terms of trees and shrubs and also grasses coming back. So I'll show you some of those examples. So if we take a look at this photograph, the terrain essentially slopes from left to right downwards. And so the community essentially has picked out trenches like these and made trenches like these. The reason why we have some kind of a break right here is that if you were to kind of keep them as a single trench, you would have to be very precise in how you know, contour them, because if you're not, then the rainwater would accumulate and flow to one side, and that entire 40, 50 feet would not benefit. But by having these breakers, what you ensure is that water runoff essentially starts distributing across all these locations, and that improves the overall moisture availability. What you would also see is presence of juvenile saplings, so to say, and these look like trees to me. These look like juvenile saplings, or seedlings, no, saplings. So all of these would kind of grow faster because of these trenches. Um, Gully plugs. One thing I really want to talk about with gully plugs is that we started this in actually February 2008, and the women, the spouses of the people who are working from Godekere, they wanted to do something, and they also wanted to be part of this restoration story. Till then, most of them were working in crafts associated with Junglescapes. So we had somebody from we had Nikhil Udupa come in, and Nikhil Udupa essentially demonstrated what this concept is, and these women very quickly picked it up and essentially showed us quite a few of these gully plugs that they made, both in channels like these and in little streams, and within half a day they're already up and running, trying to make gully plugs, collecting stones from the side, bringing them, heaping them, and so on. So when you take a look at this channel is a continuous channel, and it gets deeper by the year. We had one professor from IIT Gandhinagar who came in and told us the physics. He said that if the soil is barren and the velocity of the water exceeds 3.5 meters per second, it becomes really erosive. And that's been his thumb rule. And if you have um, uh, locations which are covered with vegetation like grass and shrubs and so on, that 3.5 meters is not enough to actually cause that kind of erosion. So the velocity of 3.5 meters per second comes because of the terrain, because you have a slope. Now, when you put in these stone overflows across the channel, you're doing two things. One is allowing water to accumulate in different locations, allowing silt to build up, and vegetation to recover. But the other is, because you put so many of these obstacles, the water never reaches the breakaway velocity at which it can cause erosion. So, that know-how that we picked up from IIT Gandhinagar, plus plus Udupa coming in and telling us how to get it done, plus the women going out and getting it done. This has been a very interesting success story. We talked about long trenches, short trenches. This is after a 15-minute shower. I still remember the story back in 2014. We were all in this Lokere village by a school. It started raining like mad, and then it stopped. And we said, "Hey, we want to see what has happened to the trenches." So we literally ran to those trenches and, you know, got there in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and you could see that in that 15-minute shower, these trenches began to have quite a bit of water. And this is probably, close to a bucket of water from a 15-minute shower. So these are what I would call as, passive structures. Once you put them in place, they essentially do their job of harvesting water. Over a period of time, they may get filled up. But in the period of time, as they get filled up, these saplings have also grown and vegetation is actually recovered. So it's a really neat low cost technique which doesn't take too much of effort. And because it's done manually by people, and they kind of look at saplings which are already growing and digging them, you actually find that this effort is not just a global kind of a water harvesting structure, but it's targeted towards these journal saplings. So with the lantana camera, um, I mean, part of it is that it's a very greedy plant. It harvests a lot of water. It takes over the forest floor, doesn't allow biodiversity to come in, and so on and so forth. The physics or the botany of it is that there is a corpusing zone, which is right here. If you cut underneath the corpusing zone at the taproot, then you can literally just pick up the lantana bush and overturn it. And the only disturbance you would have caused to the soil is right here where the taproot is going underneath. So it's a very focused technique that is targeting only the lantana bush, and nothing else. And if you actually get to the crux of it, a team of 3 people can get each of these bushes removed in about 5-6 minutes. 3 4 to 4 minutes goes away, and essentially, pushing the bush to a point where the main stem is visible and accessible. In a minute or two, you can essentially strike at the taproot and essentially cut off the taproot, and then you extricate the bush from any other vegetation which is native and essentially overturn it. So that's the cut rootstock method. A team of 10 people can remove maybe about half an acre of moderately infested lantana per day. So if you have a team of 60, we can probably remove 3 to 4 little acres of lantana per day, and all targeted, leaving back essentially the native biodiversity, um, not disturbing the grass cover if there was any, and so on and so forth. So it's a great technique. So I've talked about grass cover, moisture, the grass cover comes back. The rainwater accumulates, carries seeds along, grass cover comes back. Small swales that you would do are sources, and you disperse grass seeds, the grass seeds recover. But where do you get those seeds from? They have to be local. So we have people collecting grass seeds in the February, March time period, and essentially bringing them, processing them, storing them, and then getting into action after the summer service start. Right. So you've seen these before. Right. The other part of reducing human pressures, and this has been a story which has been going on for 15 years now. When we came into these villages in 2008, every home essentially had this 3-stone cook stove. So 3 stones, firewood put here. The fire essentially, flows around the vessels, smokes up the room, and basically, firewood consumption was very high in the range of 10 to 15 kgs per house, just for cooking. So we put in this cook stove, which is designed by Philips. We had people, make this in Lokere in Chikalchetti, and they would go and install it. They would make additional money, but here it is thermally more efficient because you could just put in these twigs or small stems, and they would heat up, and you could heat up 2 vessels at the same time. The fire would just go first here, go to the second vessel, and then go to the chimney and out. But we found out over a period of time that even if people had switched to LPG, they would use it only for emergencies. They won't use it on a daily basis. It was too expensive. But at any rate, they were not using these stoves to heat bathing water. So it turns out that when people have a hard day's work and they want to come back, in these locations, water is cold throughout the year. People want a hot water bath. and these are typically done outside, and a lot of firewood gets used up in this. So we have picked up what is called as the Gujarat boiler, which we can actually use lantana twigs and stems, the smaller ones, throw them inside, and heat this up, and in about 15 minutes they get hot water. um, and very safe, because the way it works is that once it gets heated up, you pour cold water on one side, it mixes in with really boiling hot water on the inside, and you get water at about 60 to 70 degrees Celsius from the side. So all of this has been done. So what is the impact of this particular slide? The impact of this particular slide is that per home, we save about 6 to 7 kilograms of firewood collected from the forest per day, and that translates into 2 tons per year of firewood saved, which translates for a 50 hamlet home like Lokere, about 100 tons of forest saved every year. And so this has been actually a very significant factor. And as we do all of these with the local communities, they realize that there is so much going for them, partly because of restoration based livelihoods, partly because of the amenities we provide through things like this, that they do, refrain from grazing in areas which are under restoration. And all of that actually helps in the whole system coming back. Um, when I started this talk, I talked about multiple ways to tell the story. One way is to actually talk about the community, and how restoration essentially contributes to community livelihoods, uh, community self-esteem, their sense of pride, the fact that their knowledge, ecological knowledge actually gets used. And you got to kind of look at it from their perspective and how it all pans out. So once an area to be restored is identified, um, they essentially are able to kind of go and get the job done very autonomously. So they have a lot of local decision making that they very seamlessly deploy in removing the lantana bush, trying to decide whether it can be left alone after removal. Do we need to bring in grass seeds? Do we need to bring in bamboo? So all those local decisions are actually made by them with some field personnel. But uh, I think what we've really done here is take care of um, livelihood, which is a basic requirement. But apart from that, we've really tapped into their knowledge and essentially their self-esteem, in them realizing and saying that, look, the home for the wildlife is there in the forest. My home is here, and if I keep their homes better and help the home for wildlife to be better, then there is far less chance of a conflict. So they really understand that. So what are the restoration outcomes? Over 1,200 hectares have been taken up since 2008. Um, 60% of the plots have achieved good levels of soil resilience and sustainability, good plant species diversity. Um, and that's a very important part. We've had Ganesh of FRLHD come in and really do a species map in different locations, and we see um, tremendous the biodiversity in our plots, and it's also structural biodiversity. When I say structural biodiversity, I want to show um, a picture like this. So if you see a picture like this, or a picture like this on the left, you have very good grass cover, you have trees, you have shrubs. So you have all the components of vegetation, the ground, the shrubs, the short trees, and the taller trees are all present right here. Um, and habitat utilization of fauna has increased significantly. I'll show you some pictures on that. Um, So we've seen a lot of growth in essentially, the number of species seen in terms of shrubs and herbs, in terms of grasses, in terms of trees, and it's largely because once you improve the hydrology, you set up a foundation, you created conditions which are conducive for new species to come in and take root and essentially grow. Diversity of flora, we've seen that. Um, recruitment of native flora. Um, so this is an interesting slide. It took me a bit of time to kind of see it and digest it. Ramesh made this. But what it is that you had remnant adult trees. So are these mother trees that are actually, contributing to seeds and allowing more of the same trees to come and take root? The answer is no. What we actually see is new tree species have been recruited in this region, and it's partly because the soil conditions are actually right for actually new species also to come and find their own niche and essentially grow. So it's kind of self-assembled once you kind of get the hydrology in place. A lot of rewildings. I want to show you some pictures right here, which are more, indicative of the changes that have taken place. Restored woody areas, you can see all of that right here. And having these ponds actually help because wildlife comes in and goes. The wildlife essentially um, browses and grazes along the way, disperses seeds as you go back and forth. And this whole combination of water availability plus movement of natural herbivores plus the spreading of seeds by them that contributes to this whole restoration process. Wherever we've restored lantana, especially in the Tiger Reserve region, um, what we actually see is that the lantana has been removed. It contributes to better growth of trees, and I have some very interesting data which I'm just uncovering right now. Um, but as you basically remove the lantana from the forest floor, the water availability for existing trees improves, and over a period of time, they essentially grow the canopy. And so in summer, now you actually see spotted deer basically resting under the canopy of trees. And the space that they're resting on wouldn't have been available if there were lantana. And because the lantana is gone, the trees have grown and they have shade. So it's a really nice virtuous cycle. Yeah, this is the slide I wanted to refer to for structural diversity. Nagendra walking through the forest, grass cover, shrub cover, tree cover, different tree species, different shrub species, all of them being present. So, restored grassland areas right here. Um, some very interesting, heartwarming pictures for me. When I go to the top of this Jali Gure, which is a hill next to Lokere, and I gaze at the valley down below, more often than not, if you wait patiently enough, you'll see an elephant and you can spot them. But we've also seen essentially in the valley in the dry season elephants coming in. So we were actually going to go down to the valley and we saw the elephants from the top and stopped. And we said, no, we won't go there, we'll just get back home. So these kind of things go on here. Definitely better occupancy of elephants in this region. So if you kind of take a look, Bandipur Tiger Reserve is 1,000 square kilometers. There are about 3,000 elephants in Bandipur Tiger Reserve. Occupancy is about 3 per square kilometer. So when we restore about 20 square kilometers, what we have done essentially is created fodder for about 7 or 8 elephants, 6 or 7 elephants. So that's visual sighting and elephants. It's very common for us to see scat of wildlife, tiger, sloth bear, um, barking deer. We see it almost every time we go. Pug marks and hoof marks, you can see all of that. Back in 2014, 15, when we were still on our journey, we chanced upon essentially a cheetal kill in the Jaligude, and we realized that we had both predator and prey-based movements. So we've seen that, and now it's kind of common to see evidence of these things. So, what are the key learnings? The key learnings is that Mother Nature already has a potential to restore itself. If we kind of disturb the soil, compact the soil, remove ground vegetation, uh, promote topsoil runoff, um, the seed bank now really kind of comes back up and takes root. So you need to have essentially better moisture availability, and that's really what we have done through the ANR method, which is help the soil leverage soil propagular banks. A few things to note here. When you're looking at dry deciduous and thorn forests, what we really have is basically um, fairly semi-arid conditions, and the plant species and the tree species that have grown here have kind of adapted to it. So the seeds actually have fairly good longevity and dormancy. So if you have the moisture today, seeds which are years old could actually kind of come and take root and essentially grow. So that's a very key learning from all of this. And so it's a low cost practice, method compared to essentially taking seeds, putting them in poly bags, digging pits, and planting. You do all of that at literally half the cost, or one third the cost. Um, Seed migration potential is significantly higher than what we've estimated, and it's partly because we talked about several examples where um, the trees that are remaining, the remnant trees, are not the ones that are actually giving new vegetation. We're seeing vegetation of different species coming in and taking root, which means there is seed migration. So if there is seed migration and moisture both together, then the landscape actually recovers very well. It helps natural organization. So we've really not done, we've not really played God saying that let's dig a trench next to the Hone and not the, Bejeru. I mean, it's very secular, our approach, um, in terms of improving soil moisture availability. We're blind to the species that we actually restore. The only thing that we do is remove invasive species. So what we've really done essentially is helped the natural organizational process with minimal risk of ecosystem alteration, and very effective in highly degraded areas, and that you have seen that right here. Um, and enables large scale restoration. So again, repeats sold kind of go towards the end. The end is really, a thank you. A thank you to the organization that I work for, because they funded Junglescapes, and they really, allowed volunteers to go into the forest and make a difference. They really facilitated it. They didn't stop us. So that is a real big plus. Karnataka Forest Department, I want to say they've been super helpful. They've been helpful both unofficially and unofficially. And I really want to kind of thank them for that. So even before we had MOUs in place, we had the Forest Department coming in, inaugurating sapling planting, telling us what to do, telling us do something with the community, make sure they get livelihoods. Their heart is in the right place. I really want to kind of, acknowledge that. Um, we've had CEPF A3 really help us kickstart the Lantana program. We've had Ashirvadam Trust funders. We've had L&D Technology Services funders. We've had TTK Healthcare funders. We've had CMD give us know-how for the lantana removal. And lastly and not the least, Society for Ecological Restoration. Um, so what I really want to say about SER is that this is a group of people working at a landscape level in restoration. And so if you kind of listen to their talks, they're working on 5,000 square kilometer landscape of sagebrush, trying to say the sagebrush is gone here. How do we bring it back? Restoring large, semi-arid, arid regions in Australia, for example. Doing work in African countries, for example. So they're used to working in landscapes and not just small plots. And they have essentially their own, um, grammar and rigor, and all of that is really useful. So there's something called the 18 wheel restoration. So they kind of have 18 spokes. Each of these spokes addresses different aspects: societal, ecological, resiliency, and so on. And if you kind of take a look at the 18 wheel, you'll really find out that it's a very holistic approach to essentially restoration. So, Junglescapes kind of started with, people who are very interested in doing something good, to people who are now, who've done a great job with restoring landscapes using assisted natural regeneration, and also now focusing a lot on invasive species such as lantana camera and Senna spectabilis. They're just plugging away, and the local community is plugging away, and that's the message I want to give you. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I hope I didn't take too much of time.
Thank you so much, Anand. You actually took less time than most other speakers.
Sure.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, I really, it's so close to my heart that I can just rattle this off and I could just go on forever. But anyway, thank you so much.
so there are questions. I think Ayushi has raised a hand, right? Ayushi, you wanted to ask a question? Oh, I see. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
open for questions if anybody has any. Deepak has a question. Yes, Deepak, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
It's actually very inspiring work. I must say. Thank you for
Thank you, Deepak.
working with
Yeah.
Mother Nature, and we are all trying to do our best in much smaller contributions. I had a couple of questions. One is like what is happening with the bill, forest bill, and I just want to know what your take. What can we do to change the course of that, or if you have any ideas? Because from what I hear, I know that you've been working largely with government. You have to, because by the way, I also happened met Chamraj Nagar DFO Yedakundalavada, and we have worked with him and the tribes there. And the other question I have is, I'm sure you know the T24 story in Ranthambore. You mentioned that there is a lot of in buffer zone. There are a lot of human settlements and stuff like that. So, what do you, where do you see, when do you think that will be a red flag soon with the human animal conflict? So these were my questions.
Sure. Let me first address the first question. I'm not sure that I understood the Chamarajanagar question correctly.
No, I
But
just said that I've Chamraj Nagar DFO Yedakundalavada. He is he has done huge projects with China, got a 1 crore fund from the forest department to the tribes to set up
let
their
me,
units
yeah,
for making baskets and stuff like that.
sure.
Yeah.
So,
So I was
yeah,
just mentioning that. My thing is the forest bill. What do you think? How we
sure.
can
Let me
take
address
it
the second
forward?
question.
Yeah.
Um, I think the key is to actually work with local communities, um, who are indigenous communities, um, who have essentially, spent generations working with the forest. And if you're actually consistently able to show them a much better life, and show them that you care through restoration-based livelihoods, um, they do, honor us and honor the system. They don't basically poach. They don't kill wildlife. They really know how to coexist with wildlife really well. I mean, and they use the same pond to have their cows go and drink water, and the same pond the elephants would come in and drink water in the night, and it's become part of their everyday life. So that's something that I really want to mention. And you got to kind of ensure that you show that you care in multiple ways. So when we had COVID, we stopped going there, and they all understood that something big is going on in the cities. Um, we wanted to minimize their exposure to, COVID by through their day-to-day activities, like going to Gundalpet to essentially get the supplies and provisions. We essentially got them supplies for every month after month, when we had the major COVID wave, to ensure that their levels of exposure are all lower. And then they have things like insurance cover and so on and so forth. Um, and they are now given certificates as barefoot restorers. So in case they want to go out and get a job somewhere else, they can do it. So you got to show your human side, and you got to show that you care, and work with communities which have a good history of actually coexisting with wildlife. So that's the only thing that I can actually tell you. It's context driven. We have no magic formula.
No, thank you. And Chamraj Nagar forest area, Jenukuruba, some of their honey I promote it in Bangalore, and I sell it for
Oh,
them.
lovely. Very nice.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
nice. Sure.
yeah. Thank you. And
Sure.
anything about the forest bill you would like to share, like what do you think? So where can we go with this? I follow Sonam Monsoon that he's trying to do something and like raise kind of the movement kind of thing. What do you think?
Your connection is kind of not
No,
very good.
forest.
Can you
I was
repeat?
referring to the forest bill. Forest bill.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I know it's already. Has it like gone out of our hands? We can't do anything, or can we do something as nature lovers? That's what I just want to know your take on.
Sure. Can you just type in what you said just now? I'm really
Uh,
sorry.
Anand, I mean, this was the question that I sent you on WhatsApp about the forest bill that just got passed. So he's
Ah,
asking, is it out of our hands? Is there anything we can do? He had written that, should we start chipko movements all over the country?
right. I think what we need to do is two things, right? One is, I mean, and now I think the horse is out of the stable. I think it's very difficult to put the house back unless there is a change in the government. Um, but there is one thing that the government has talked about, which is called the green credit. Um, so what they're saying is that if you're a private landowner and you are essentially restoring forests there, we'll give you green credits. And what we will assure you is that we will not grab away your land because it's now beginning to look like a forest. So you got to see as to how seriously will the government actually honor this promise. Because if they honor this promise, it's a game changer. Um, Now you have all these other things which are going on, which is making it simpler for people to go on mine, build railway tracks and so on and so forth. But I don't think that's going to happen so much here. I mean, fortunately, our section of the forests are not mineral rich, and there is hardly any incentive to go on mine and alter the landscape radically because there's no iron ore, there's no coal, there's no bauxite, and so on. And um, and, and so I really don't see major pressures in the portion of Western Ghats. But I think where we're going to see pressures would be, you know, in things like pumps hydro storage. So if you look at, for example, Nilgiris, you have the Silvassa project that the government is toying around with. You have a pillow dam, which is at pretty much sea level, and they're dreaming of pipelines going from pillow dam to 7,000 feet high and then coming back down. So water is pumped up with renewable energy, and when there is demand in the evening, that dam essentially starts discharging water seriously and generating power. That's pump storage. But those kind of schemes are really harmful because you don't want to create another reservoir anywhere in Nilgiris. Um, and you don't want to dam water flow anywhere because the minute you dam the water flow, you lose your marshes, you lose your wetlands, all of that. So you have significant issues with all of that. So we got to be very proactive. One thing that I see is that there is no, I mean, what is fortunate is that even with an aggressive government, we have red tape, and we have to use this red tape to the maximum advantage possible.
That's interesting. Good point. Thanks,
But
Anand.
the green credits is something I would go after because if you're able to distract the government and say, "Hey, great move! Here are all the great ideas that we have to restore forests, even food forests." I think it's a very useful thing to do.
Thanks, Anand. Vinayak had raised his hand. Vinayak, do you have a question?
Hi, Anand. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Actually, you sort of partially answered my question. I was thinking about the potential for carbon credits and biodiversity credits in terms of the work that you do, because it's on quite a large scale, right? Is that something
Yeah.
that you measure, like soil biodiversity and the carbon content and so on? Is that something that you're looking at doing in the
Yes,
future?
actually, the answer is uh, um, um, yes. We are trying to figure out what can be done. So that's the correct
Okay.
answer. So the challenge is that if you go working on public land, the people who do the carbon credits are very clear that it has to be in private lands. um,
Right.
and it becomes a bit messy for them because it's very difficult for you to go and convince a private funding agency that here is a piece of degraded forest, I built it up, it's done 15 years, I can show you satellite images, past photographs and all that. It doesn't really buy them much. And then the second question is, who does the carbon credit actually accrue to? Did it accrue to the funder? Did it accrue to the forest department? Did it accrue to the local community? Did it accrue to the NGO? So those are all very unclear. But what I want to say is that if you come to many of these landscapes, Uma's been here. Um, I would be very happy to take any of you to a tour of agricultural lands abutting the Bandipur Tiger Reserve in the Mangala Lokere LCT region. You'll be shocked. It's 25 square kilometers. There is 5,000, um, 25 square kilometers. It's more than 5,000 acres of land. It's bigger than Ooty, Kunur, Kotagiri all combined, much bigger, and and barely 15% is actually farmed. The rest of the 85% is actually left barren and tilled. And because it's barren and tilled, um, you know, what happens is that the landscape never recovers. You don't even see a stray sapling coming in and taking root because the soil is compacted to death. There is no nutritional, there's hardly nutrition left in the soil. So nothing grows there. But if you're able to kind of bring them back, you know, through ANR, through different techniques that you could actually bring to the table, you would find that um, that each acre can actually harvest about 50 to 100 tons of carbon, and if it is 50 to 100 tons of carbon, then you're suddenly looking at 500 to $1,000 accrued over a period of 5 to 7 years. And people don't make that kind of money here. People struggle to make 5, 6,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees per acre. So people are given up on farming and they're just doing anything they can to make money, day labor by and large. But yeah, the answer is yes,
Right.
especially
So
private.
that's quite an interesting model that we could pursue to kind of close the circle, right? Because a lot of at a lot of time, what happens is there's not enough money coming in, or it's money that's tagged for a certain you know activity. But if this were to be pursued and is actually bringing in more money than the average farmer's income over the year, isn't that something that would be particularly interesting for people in this region?
Absolutely. So the thing is this, I mean, part of it is that, um, uh, we as a bunch of NGOs essentially don't like to mix commerce with all of this. We want to keep our work very pure from a motivational perspective, but I think that comes in the way of actually greening our country.
Hmm.
It really does. So if you start thinking more practically, but without taking shortcuts, I'm not saying you're going to grow eucalyptus here. Should not do that. But
Right.
bring back native species and do ANR in farmlands and see what the output is. The output is going to be different in different locations. So in our location in Bandipur, you're going to struggle to make 50 to 100 tons per acre. You do this in Nilgiris in a degraded tea estate, you're going to get 600 tons per acre. Um, you know, so it's going to be very different. In Malnad, it's going to be 600 to 800 tons per acre. So the potential varies, but the concept is the same. The land is capable of, getting greened and greened in a biodiverse way. And if that can be monetized, really, why not? Especially if you're able to do that without sacrificing food security. I mean, India is reaching a situation where the irrigated lands produce 80% of the food. So if you recognize that and kind of say that in the non-irrigated lands, if at least 20 or 10 to 15% becomes biodiverse forests, that's a fantastic goal to have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Given me something to think about.
Thank you, Vinayak. I think Pranjal also had raised his hand. Yes, Pranjal, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Anand. It was a really interesting talk. I just wanted to ask you when you mentioned that the native species are being planted, invasive species are being planted. Uh, after the interventions of removing lantana. So, how do you get these native species? I mean, is there a seed bank that you always refer to, or what kind of studies that goes in for that particular place to study what are different native species that can be planted?
Sure. So what happens is that if you're looking at a moderately infested lantana region, typically under the canopy of the lantana bushes, you'll see some amount of grass cover, and you'll see some native saplings actually already growing. And so if you remove lantana, then the key question is, have you kind of thoroughly shocked the system or not? So there was a question that I actually had when we were looking at cut to stock method back in 2013-14. So we had a 1,500 square foot plot where we kind of went and rephotographed every month to see what happened. And what we found was that the native saplings which are there were all bent over like, an old person, because you couldn't penetrate the canopy. But once you removed it, they all began to stand up and grow, and none of them died. So it actually worked very well. But if you actually have a scenario where the lantern infestation is very dense, then whatever they call a heliotropic properties of the root system, which kind of kills off all other vegetation, that kind of takes hold. And the soil essentially becomes, brown and barren, and that's not going to, come back so easily. So in those regions, you really have to have a seed bank ready. So you got to kind of make sure, observe, and say, have seeds. You don't need too much of seeds, but a fistful of seeds or a 10 square foot belt sprinkled across with some rains will essentially start taking root. And then once the grass essentially starts taking root, it starts spreading. The other species that we actually went after, especially in the Bandipur region, is that in 2012 we had a bamboo die out. The bamboos flowered and dispersed and died. But 2012 also coincided with a very bad drought year. So we hardly had any rains, and also the seeds dispersed, and basically found that, lo and behold, 60 years ago I was growing up nicely. Now I have only lantana on the ground. So this actually struggled to actually germinate and actually grow and take hold. So we really felt, the need to bring back native bamboo species. So we did seed dispersals. We had planted saplings. The saplings are of course more expensive, but a combination of those along with grasses actually helped. So I would say, it's context driven. If you see the landscape really brown, caked up, and so on, you got to bring back grass at bare minimum.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I had one actually, Anand.
Yeah.
Would you tell everyone a little bit about the community, the people who actually do the lantana removal, the local community?
Sure. So we had, primarily the Jenikurubas. So we had Jenikurubas from the Gudikere village. And then we have a few Soligas coming in from other villages. We have another village called Mobuno Gunahalli. And then you have Chiluranipura, which are primarily cattle herders. Um, um, so all of them, 50 to 60 of them, they kind of all signed up. Um, we organize them into different self-help groups. So that way, the self-help groups are registered. They get, insurance cover. They get medical insurance and the like. And banking wise, it's very easy to actually transact money from Junglescapes into, let's say, the SHGs, and the SHGs would get paid every week. So all of that would actually happen. And those worked out very well. We also had other dynamics like, in every village, the women also wanted to be part of the workforce. And we gave them, other plots where they could actually go and work as a team of women, fairly secure amongst themselves. And they were quite fearless, and they actually did a really good job. Now, what is it in the community, engagement part that did not turn out to be a roaring success. That was essentially lantana crafts. So two parts to it. One story, one part is that um, the consumers are actually quite a discerning lot. And so the discerning lot essentially wants an exclusively made stuff for which they can spend 5, 10K, 15K, whatever they want, they'll go and order. Um, the the rest of the people really want stuff which is very cheap. So if you give them a pen stand, they'll say, "Give it to me for 20 rupees." And but took so much of time. If it is 20 rupees, then it needs to be done in 15 minutes, in less than an hour, because people would want to get paid 250, 300 rupees a day. So, we found out that the pricing was not remunerative enough, and it was not really, um, really good. Then the second part is that, um, you got to have people who are really good at what they do. If you could have, for example, had, people take some extract from lantana hypothetically, and say, I'm going to paint, and you have a bunch of Wali tribals who could paint with extracts from lantana. That's a fantastic story. But when you don't have crafts naturally woven into their competency, you can't go and teach them new things. So if you do, yes, you can sit and handle them and make it successful, but it's too much of work. It takes your focus away from restoration. So that is probably one thing that I want to say. The second thing I want to say about the lantana crafts is that, um, if you take lantana bushes, only about 10 to 15% of what you get from the lantana is actually useful to crafts, because the rest of them, the stems are too thin. You bend them, they break. So they're not strong enough. They cannot bend them and form them and so on and so forth. So only about 10 to 15% of the bushes get used up. So if you're looking at, a tractor load of lantana coming in every couple of days, barely about 10% of it is going to get used up, and that's going to take about 2 weeks. So the input is never going to be equal to the, what you're able to do with all of this. So yeah, it doesn't really make a case for itself. So that's the only part I want to say about the community. But in terms of, everybody coming out with very similar stories at different points in time, um, that's very consistent. They all come out and say in Kannada, "Namma mane illi ide, prani pakshi mane ali ide," um, and they kind of say, we're making their lives much better. And so the prani pakshi la illi varalla, namalike ella santoshama ide. So that's what they actually say.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? If not, I have actually one more.
Sure.
Purushottam Sistia. Yes, sir. Mr. Class.
Yes, sorry, if you have a question, you can complete that because
No, no, it's okay. No, you please go ahead.
I'm a totally novice. I have no background, no nothing, but I'm very, very interested and committed. So I put a question in this, while registering. There is any question, I put it there. Basically, I'm talking of a area in Telangana state, which is a little bit dry, but not a totally useless
Sure.
place because there is something being grown. I'm thinking of growing a forest. Is it possible to develop a forest in a small 2 acre land? And how does one do it? And what will be the cost? What will be the implications? And what is the time scale? Is what I'm wanting to know. But for advanced meeting like this is not a right question. I don't mind talking to.
Sure. So actually, what I would like to say is that, is this location in the Western Telangana or the Eastern Telangana?
It is a place called Mid uh, Midja. One second.
Sir, you're breaking up.
It is around say around 100 kilometers from Hyderabad towards Bangalore.
So it's kind of in the middle. It's middle in between Bangalore and Hyderabad.
Yeah, it is, but closer to Hyderabad. It is only 100
100
kilometers away
kilometers from
from
Hyderabad.
Hyderabad.
Okay. So
On the
it's
way to Bangalore.
okay.
Sir, if you could, mute your video and just go on audio. Maybe the bandwidth will be better.
Okay. I hope that you are able to hear me a little better.
Uma, were you able to capture the?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
are you able to hear me, Anand? I think Anand's
Yeah. So
internet.
actually, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
The real challenge with Telangana is actually the summer. Your temperatures are going to be anywhere between 40 and 47 degrees Celsius, and that's going to be there from around April to June until the monsoons begin. But Telangana is actually a remarkably green state, especially if you go, towards, if you go from Sirpur side towards Balarsha, that section of Telangana is actually quite green because it gets a fair bit of rains from the southwest monsoon. So you got to actually pick your speed. You got to stick to ANR, focus on hydrology, refrain from planting to the extent possible, unless you can guarantee that in the summertime it can be watered. I mean, if the community has the wherewithal to do that because they have a good water source, there's a large dam or a lake which is filled up and water is not a problem, then yeah, in a couple of acres you can plant, keystone species, whatever is seen in locations like Kaval and Tadoba, if that's the region you're looking at. On the other hand, if you're looking at regions like Vikarabad or Tandur, the landscape changes quite a bit in terms of the composition of the forest. But I would say to the extent possible, stick with ANR. If you can water in summer, please do. But 70% ANR, 15 to 20% of planting is what I would really recommend. Planting only if you find that there's nothing at all in the rootstock which is going to come up. So as I said, natural regeneration is still, my biggest recommendation.
Anand and Uma, with your permission, I'd like to add to the
Sorry.
answer. With your permission, I'd
Sorry,
like
didn't
to.
get you. You're
You
not.
can't hear me?
Yeah, it's not very
Hello?
clear.
Hello?
Hello, Deepak?
Yes, sorry, Deepak.
Now can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Better.
yeah.
So I'd like to say that
Go
around
ahead.
50 or 60 kilometers from Hyderabad, there is a
Yeah.
Heartfulness Khana Ashram. Have you all heard of it? Near the Mr. Purushottam, near
Yeah.
Ramanuja statue, the new
56
Ramanujan
kilometers from
statue.
Hyderabad. What's the name of the place?
Yes.
Khana Ashram.
Yeah.
So,
I've
Okay.
heard of the
yeah,
place.
yes, Heartfulness has a huge, I think, a 2,000-acre, facility where in that place, in that heat, they have made it a rainforest.
Yeah. I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yes.
But
So
they,
if you can visit there, when you're close to Hyderabad, you can visit there. They have labs, they have nurseries, they have a tissue culture lab where they're trying to grow forgotten trees of that area. And
Sure.
the first approach should be harvest water, harvest soil, then do anything else. That's what it should.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all. I just wanted to add to
Yeah.
that. And we
Yeah.
go there often as people who working with nature. We go there to Kana Ashram, and it's an amazing facility. And they'll guide you as well if you want to grow something. I mean, if you're keen on growing a forest and all, they'll guide you as well.
Sure. That's really good to know because when you have
Yeah.
so many different landscapes in the country and each of them
Yes.
requires a different prescription, and you got to
Yeah.
be very respectful of variations and conditions because
True.
the
Because
people in Telangana are
that's
so different.
relevant. Yeah, that experiment is relevant to where he is and close, so that maybe it will help.
Yeah.
Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
I hope that helps, Mr. Sisla.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It
Thank you so
is.
much.
It's
Uh,
Khan.
oh,
It's like, yeah.
no, Uma. Otherwise, you can share my number with him, or I can share my number, and you can call me separately. I can
I
guide you to
greatly
the place.
appreciate it. Umar, if you can
Surely.
help.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I'll put it on the chat here.
Yeah, that will be great.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I'd like to say it was an amazing 1 hour for sure.
Thank
Thank
you so much.
you. Thank you, Anand, very much. I mean, Mr. Anand, it was really amazing. I mean, I mean, you may be thinking you're done a small impact, but I think you have done quite a bit of work. So that's what, I mean, I can gather from 1 hour of sharing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
I saw Girish recent.
Yeah, Girish, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Anand, and it was a nice talk. I thought of asking, like, is there any nurseries in least where we can get some native varieties of plant, or we need to go with the tissue cultured way of saplings?
No, we do have nurseries. So, for example, Hanumant has been running a nursery in the Mysore belt. We've tried it in the in the Lokere region, but groundwater becomes scarce sometimes. So we're doing it in Mysore, where he's got more control over water. But yes, I have seen us work with more than 25 to 30 different species. All the seeds harvested from the forest. We now know how to process those seeds. Each seed requiring getting a different treatment. We can get them to germinate and grow. So it's none of it is a problem. It can really be done. But
Any chance we can?
if you have a specific list, you could contact Hanumant. The other thing that I would also recommend is that if you Google Suresh Forestry, they are in Chikbalapur, and
Surest forestry, is it?
yeah, and they're a very good collection of seeds, multiple species. I mean, really, 70 to 80% of the time, I get a yes when I ask them for seed. They give me, and we
Yes,
just
and
do
he
a
has
blank
a
transfer
huge
and they'll
godown in
bring it to you
Chikbalapur.
immediately.
Sorry to speak in
Sorry?
between. He has a huge godown in Chikbalapur as well, forest species, and he sends it all over the
Yes,
country.
yes,
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. Is it the one which Deepak you have recommended sometimes in the group?
Yes, yes. I can share it. I can share it. I have it. I have his
Oh,
number and I know him well. You can call and you can tell Mr. Anand's name or my name, and you can just start off saying that this is what you need.
okay. Is this the one which you have like few times recommended in
Yes,
the group?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Same one, same one.
Okay.
There is also another nursery. It's not in Karnataka. It's in Tamil Nadu, in Tiruvannamalai. The nursery is called Forest Way. It's right at the foot of the hill, very close to Ramanashram. So I think
yes.
even Anand, you
Thanks,
had
thanks
got
for
some
mentioning
saplings
the
from
name.
there once, right?
Yeah, I got saplings from them in 2016 when we had a very bad drought. Um, Actually, I visited in Forest Way last year. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think it was last year. Um, so we went and saw what they have done. They've planted by the hundreds and thousands, but they've also done assisted natural regeneration, and they've combined the two. And that's something I wanted to actually mention, which is that, and we have done that indirectly in our places in small ways. There are some ponds which I take Uma to, where the pond essentially is a good receptacle for moisture, collects water very, very well, and on that, whatever we have planted has actually come out very well. And that's a strategy to consider for Telangana as well. Get a pond, get moisture harvested, and get it to collect seeds and so on and so forth. Let the soil become richer. So in the first year or two, you may not see great results, but by the time you're in your seventh or eighth year, that pond actually does wonders in terms of bringing back species. But yes, Forest Way has done a brilliant job of planting species, but also planting species, combining it with water harvesting structures very well.
Yeah.
And is this a good idea? Like we approach our state forest department nursery. Is that the same varieties we get, or like
No, no, no.
no?
The
Okay.
forest department will give you timber varieties, commercially, mostly all, silver oak, things like that.
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention about Telangana is that there is a
No, I
gentleman
don't think
called
he's asking
Paragain.
about Telangana, and this is Girish. You're asking for Karnataka only, no?
Sure,
No,
sorry,
no.
sorry,
Yeah, I'm asking for Orissa.
You're asking
for
for
Orissa.
Orissa. Okay. Oh, we we don't know anything about Orissa Forest Department. Sorry. I mean, Anand, unless you know something. Sorry.
No. No. Yeah, but what I wanted to mention was Telangana's got a forest department official. He's in the news pretty frequently. He writes opinion articles in Hindu and other newspapers. His last name starts with a P, Paragain or something like that. I can pull out his email, but he seems to be somebody who's, very keen and very interested. So,
Okay.
if I can dig out his email, I'll basically pass it on to you, Uma. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
That will be helpful. Give me. Thanks.
Yeah. Call me on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Mr. Siklal. Are there any other questions? Okay, in which case then thank you all very much for coming, and thank you so much, Anand. It was a really wonderful talk, and it was like a revision for me because it's been a while since I'd listened to the Bandipur story, and it's really very nice. So I would recommend that everybody should try and visit. I think now they are not allowing people the
Yeah.
inside
Yeah.
the.
But we'll see as to what we can do. It's a small group. We'll see as to how we could manage. We can get to locations which are, you know, um, generally more easily can be seen, more discreetly and the like. Or even if you go close enough to the region, you get a very good handle on what's gone on. Yeah, we can figure something out. But yeah, I want to thank all of you. Uma, I want to thank you for inviting me. And I also want to thank my colleagues, Ramesh and Hanumant. Um, this is a very unique organization because this is not an organization where, you know, um, which is really top down. This is an organization where all of us have actually, found ways to, learn and contribute. And the organization has grown because of all of this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anand. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, and thank you everyone for attending this talk.